Hey guys, well, I finally got my teacher Flunked the Planet, and it's been a really long time, like a year, maybe less. But I finally got the book. I'm gonna start reading it. There should be 21 chapters. Yep, 21 chapters. This is the first one. I'm also gonna read the Greetings Earthlings part. There's like a little intro. I'm also gonna read that along with the first chapter in this video. So, I guess we'll just get right into it. I also don't remember what happens in this. Like, I remember the basic idea, but I don't know exactly what happens, because it's been a long time. So it says, Greetings, Earthlings. My name is Peter Thompson, and I'm either the greatest hero in the history of the Earth, or the biggest traitor the planet has ever known. I guess it all depends on your point of view. Whatever label you decide I deserve, traitor or hero, I have to share it with Susan Simmons and Duncan Dougal. Why do the first names and last names? Okay. Susan Simmons, Duncan Dougal, and then Peter Thompson. Like, it's SSDD and then PT. Anyways. Only they're gone now, and I'm the one who's left to tell the story. If you've ever read the other books Susan, Duncan, and I wrote about our adventures with the aliens, you can go right to the first chapter. Though, you might want to read the rest of this as a reminder of what's already happened. If you haven't read those books, let me tell you what you need to know. This whole thing actually started with Susan. When our 6th grade teacher, Miss Schwartz, disappeared, it was Susan who discovered that our substitute teacher, Mr. Smith, was really an alien named Broxholm who was planning to kidnap 5 kids from our class and take them into space. Also, yes, this isn't my bedroom. My sister's in there, so this is where I am right now. Susan came to me for help. She chose me, even though I was the class geek, because I read a lot of science fiction, and she figured I would be more likely to believe her than anyone else she knew. I did believe her too, but not until we had slipped into Mr. Smith's house and found Miss Schwartz being held prisoner in a force field in his attic. At the last minute, Susan discovered a way to defeat Broxholm. The other thing that happened at the last minute was that I decided to go with him, which is how I ended up traveling across the galaxy in a spaceship called the New Jersey. When school started again in the fall, our class bully Duncan Dougal discovered that there was still an alien teacher around. This one was a female named Creeblim. She fried Duncan's brain, turning him into a genius, just so she could use him to replace a communication device that had been in Broxholm's ship the night he and I took off. While Duncan was getting his brains fried, I was making friends with aliens. My favorite was a little blue being named Hulan. He gave me a new name, Krepta, which means child of the stars, and informed me that he was going to be my teacher. Hulan was mysterious about a lot of things, and I suspected that he knew more than he was telling me. But he was kind of funny, and I really liked him. Oh no, not kind of. Kind and funny. Then a tragedy happened. Hulan, who was fascinated by the idea of telepathy, tried to connect his brain to mine with a machine he had been working on. When he turned on the machine and made contact with my mind, the experience drove him into a coma. His last wish before sinking completely into the coma was that the Interplanetary Council, which was talking about blowing up Earth, would give the planet a final chance, which is what I want to tell you about now. From Peter Thompson, Child of the Stars. So chapter 1 is called Nika Nika Flexum Puspa. Whatever that means. I guess we'll find out. Okay. Broxholm's orange eyes were glowing. The leathery lime green skin of his face was stretched tight in a look that I could not interpret. The view screen behind him showed an image of the Earth floating in the dark glory of space. Broxholm pointed to a red button that glowed more brightly than his eyes. "This is it," he said. "The button." My throat was dry. What would happen if you pushed it? His lipless mouth pulled back in something like a smile, revealing rounded purplish teeth. Nothing. At least not now. It takes a complex series of secret commands to activate it. And if that series of commands is used? Asked Susan Simmons, who was standing beside me. Broxholm turned and gazed at the image of Earth. Stardust, he whispered. Whoa, said Duncan Dougal. Major bummer. Another being entered the chamber. Turning, I saw Creeblum, the alien who had fried Duncan's brain and made him super smart. Her lavender hair, thick as worms, was writhing around her head. The council is ready to see us, she said, gesturing over her shoulder with her long, three-pronged nose. I swallowed. The Interplanetary Council was trying to decide how to handle what they called the Earth question, which was basically, what do we do with the only species on 10,000 planets that is bright enough to figure out space travel yet dumb enough to have wars? That species was human beings, of course, and I didn't much care for any of the aliens' current plans, which I had explained to Susan and Duncan earlier that night when I told them the story of my experiences since I had gone into space with Broxholm. If we start with the last nasty option and work up, I had said, then Plan A calls for the... Oh, no, not last nasty. Least nasty. If we start with the least nasty option and work up, I had said, then Plan A calls for the aliens to leave us alone for now. That's not so bad, Susan had said. Unfortunately, most of the aliens who favor it do so because they figure if they leave us alone, we'll destroy ourselves before we make it into space. That way the problem is solved and they don't have to feel guilty. Hey! Hannah's in my room. That was my mom. What was I saying? That stinks, Duncan had cried. Agreed. Now the aliens who support what we'll call Plan B would like to take over the planet. Susan's eyes had widened. An alien invasion just like we feared from the beginning. Not quite. This group wants to fix things. They would cure diseases, stop wars, end poverty, that kind of thing. Duncan had blinked in surprise. Sounds great. It would be, except they'll only do it if we give them total control of the planet. Duncan had started to ask why, then nodded. They're afraid once they give us their technology, we'll use it against them. Oh, Duncan said that. You've got it, I'd said, reminding myself not to be surprised when Duncan figured things out. So what's the third option? Susan had asked. Plan C. Restrict us to our own solar system either by sabotaging our science so we never develop faster than light travel, or by setting up a military blockade. Since I've always believed it is our destiny to go to the stars, I hated that idea more than I can tell you. Most aliens think that wouldn't work, I had continued. They figured sooner or later we'd get out anyway. So we have Plan D. D for destruction, you might say. The group supporting this wants to blow us up now, before we can get into space and really make trouble. They believe if we make it out of the solar system, the final cost in lives and destructions will be far greater than if they simply wipe us out today. They look at us the way we look at a group of monkeys that accidentally learned to make atomic bombs. Interesting, but too dangerous to be allowed to live. The bad news was the aliens seemed to be leaning toward Plan D. The good news was they were going to let us try to change their minds. We followed Creeblum to the wall. She had her pet Poot, which was also named Poot, for reasons I didn't understand, riding on her shoulder. Poot was sort of an alien slug that oozed and changed shape. I had noticed that Duncan seemed to be very fond of it. I guess it was fond of Duncan too, since when it noticed him it raised a blob of itself and cried, Poot! Creeblum stopped in front of a large circle. Mounted in the wall next to it were 12 rows of multicolored marbles. She punched 6 of the marbles. The circle turned blue. This was what the aliens called a transcendental elevator. It could transport beings from one place to another instantly, which was just as well since the New Jersey, that was the spaceship we were on, had thousands of miles of corridors. I followed Creeblum through the circle and into the meeting chamber of the Interplanetary Council. Susan gasped when she came in behind me. I didn't blame her. Each of the 8 beings on the council came from a different world. Seeing them all together was plenty strange. Actually, what we were seeing were holographic projections of the council members. The council members themselves remained on their own worlds. However, the three-dimensional images were so realistic I rarely thought about that. First to speak was an alien who looked like a pile of red seaweed with thick green stalks growing out at the top. It made a series of popping, bubbling sounds, then wiggled the squishy-looking pods that dangled from the end of each stalk to indicate that what it had said was a question. I understood the gesture because the aliens had installed a universal translator in my brain, and it interpreted whatever any of them said. In turn, I was to translate their sounds and gestures for Susan and Duncan. I turned to Susan. Her hair, usually blonde, had a green tint from the odd light of the chamber. Susan is very pretty by Earth standards, but I had seen so many versions of beauty since I joined the aliens, I didn't think about that much now. He wants to know if you understand why you are here, I said. I do, she replied, speaking directly to red seaweed. Peter told me all about it. And do you accept this task? Susan took so long to answer that I began to fear that the alien might get upset. I understood. It was a big job. But even so, I gave her a nudge. I accept, she said more loudly than I expected. And you, Duncan Dougal? Asked an alien who looked more like shadow than anything real and solid. It spoke by changing the way light reflected from its body. Duncan's round face was serious. It was hard for me to imagine a kid who had bullied his way through grade school, a kid who appeared to have all the sensitivity of a brick, being responsible for the survival of the planet. But I was prejudiced. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Duncan had been picking on me and everyone else in our class for so long that it was hard to remember how different he was now that the aliens had unleashed his natural intelligence by frying his brain. When I translated the question, Duncan nodded. I accept, he said solemnly. And you, Krepta? Asked a tall sea-green alien. I hesitated for a moment. After all, the mission had been partly my idea. I accept, I said. Though I meant to say it proudly, my voice came out sounding small and scared. Next to speak was a purple alien whose long tentacles stretched across a silvery rack. A nozzle mounted above the rack sprayed lavender mist over the tentacles, keeping them slick, and shiny. Broxholm ein Nargs Egg Erkzen Zax Skrads, it asked. The mouthful of syllables represented Broxholm's full name, including his family group, Gnar Erkson, and his family, Skrads. Broxholm was standing behind me. I turned to look at him. Putting a hand on my shoulder, he wrinkled his high green forehead, his way of signaling agreement. The final member of our party to be sworn in was Kreeblum. Her thick lavender hair was rippling with so many conflicting emotions. She looked as if she had a colony of confused worms climbing out of her head. This is what happens when you read outside. I began to wonder if she had changed her mind, but after a moment she closed her third eye, the one in the middle of her forehead, and said, I accept. The council didn't ask us to swear on a holy book or anything. The aliens expect that if you say you'll do something, you'll do it. Only I wasn't entirely sure what we had just said we would do. Man, there's flies out here. Basically they had just given us the last 3 weeks of October to put together a report on the state of Earth and its people. But what was supposed to be in the report? How could we make them think better of us? At the moment, the aliens viewed us the way you and I look at flu germs. Insignificant, yet nasty and dangerous. Or worse. I think they considered all of humanity as a sickness threatening to overtake the galaxy if something wasn't done about us. The newcomers will need translators, said a large bat-like alien who dangled from the ceiling in a sling. Its voice, which I had not heard before, was like nails scraping over concrete. I could feel it in my spine. After Susan and Duncan took their hands away from their ears, I translated the alien's screech. Duncan looked puzzled. Why do we need translators to go back to Earth? Because your planet, which is yet to figure out the benefit of true communication, has hundreds of different languages, screeched the bat-like alien. The other aliens made sounds of sorrow and disapproval at our backwards ways. When I explained Bat Thing's answer, Duncan's eyes lit up. You mean these translators will let us understand any language on Earth? He cried eagerly. They would hardly be universal translators if they didn't, said Red Seaweed. adding a gesture that meant something like, "Is water wet?" "Wow," said Duncan. "This is going to be great." Suddenly his smile faded. The blood drained from his face. "Wait a minute," he said, his voice quavering. Are you going to do brain surgery on me?" In my opinion, brain surgery on the old Duncan would have been a good idea. He'd had nothing to lose, and it might have improved things. But now that I had been inside his brain a couple of times, as a result of being hooked into some alien communication machines, I understood why he was so upset. Since the aliens had fried the thing, it was pretty amazing. I wouldn't have wanted to take a chance with it either. I was trying to decide whether to tease Duncan or reassure him when a wave of dizziness swept over me. My own brain felt as if it had come loose inside my skull and began to spin. "Nika, Nika, flexum puspa," I cried. As I was wondering where the words had come from, everything went black, and I collapsed in a heap on the floor. That was the end of chapter 1. It's a little bit longer. This one is a little bit long. It's because we also did the recap thing at the beginning. So thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. I'll make next chapter as soon as I can.